Earlier today, Matt Gaetz withdrew himself from consideration for the position of Attorney General. In an X post, Gaetz wrote that while the momentum was strong, it's clear that my confirmation was unfairly becoming a distraction to the critical work of the Trump-Vance transition. Thus, I will be withdrawing my name from consideration to serve as Attorney General. Here to discuss is Matthew Peterson, editor-in-chief of Blaze News, and Rebeka Zeljko. She's the political reporter for Blaze News. So, Rebeka, what is all the talk right now in D.C. about Matt Gaetz withdrawing from the Attorney General position?
Yeah, I mean, this announcement was just as shocking as the original nomination, to be honest. I was on my way to a lunch. I was in an Uber when I saw the news. I was scrambling to write this up. But basically, within just less than 2 weeks of the announcement, Gaetz decided that he was going to withdraw from the race, or rather from the nomination. And this comes as he has been having these Senate meetings over the last few days with different Senate Republicans and sort of trying to make his pitch to make sure that although Republicans hold the majority in the Senate, it is rather slim going into the 119th Congress. And so there was definitely some legwork to be done there. And I guess coming out of those meetings, it didn't really seem like maybe he would have the votes, which was some of the speculation going into this nomination, was that maybe he might be too provocative of a politician. He did make an attempt. He met with many senators who, as you mentioned, he said had very positive takeaways. But at the end of the day, it seemed like maybe he just didn't have enough votes to actually go through with the confirmation.
Yeah, Rebeka, and we should remind our audience, I mean, it's not a lot of votes, right? You only need a few senators to say no. People like Murkowski and others who've been mentioned publicly now, none of whom would surprise our audience. And then all of a sudden that makes it impossible. This, to me, brings us back to the reality of Senate confirmation battles. People need to understand that this is how it works, and all you need is a couple of these people, right, to say no. So where does he go from here, do you think? Because that'll be indicative of whether or not this was part of, a lot of people have suggested this was part of a plan, right? They're putting him out here to get him out of Congress, out of the ethics probe, and on the path towards something else. I have no idea, but people are saying that. What do you think he does next? What do we know?
Well, that's a lot of talk right now is what's the 4D chess that's going on behind the scenes. And I'm in a similar boat as you. A lot of people are sort of left speculating what his next move will be. As you mentioned, he could really only afford to lose three votes in the Senate, assuming that J.D. Vance was acting as that potential tiebreaker. But as you said, it's sort of up in the air. He hasn't confirmed whether or not he is going to remain in the House. It's worth noting that when he resigned in his resignation letter, he said that he had no intent to swear into the 119th Congress, although he's not necessarily barred from serving again if he decided to swear in that oath. And so we'll see if he returns to the House as he has in previous years, or if he decides to take up a new career. J.D. Vance, he commented on Matt Gaetz's withdrawal from the race, and he had mentioned that his future seems really bright, and he's clearly one of the very capable members of Congress who's aligned with President Trump. And so I'm sure that we'll be seeing more of him in the future. There's some speculation about where he will be going to next. There's been some rumors about him potentially running for governor of Florida, or if DeSantis would actually appoint him to fill Rubio's seat, who is likely to be confirmed to the Senate. So there's a lot of speculation, but there's not a great basis in terms of confirmed reporting. So we'll have to see how this unfolds over the next few months. But either way, it'll be fascinating to watch.
It absolutely will be. And I remember, Rebeka, that the day that we announced that Matt Gaetz was going to be the person that they would put up for Attorney General was the exact same day that Thune became the new Senate Majority Leader. And we were talking on this show, like, these two things don't feel like they would really go together. So what does this tell us now about Trump's mandate and how it's going to be moving going forward?
You're absolutely right. I mean, I think that at the end of the day, there's always going to be a slight disconnect between what is the popular sentiment, what is the MAGA mandate, and what is actually going to take place in Washington, D.C. At the end of the day, the Republican Party is Trump's party, but with a lot of these federal nominations, they are going to require Senate confirmation. And although the Senate is a perfectly fine representation of people to the extent that they're elected. They aren't necessarily a perfect representation of the party, or at least the party leader. And so I think we're going to see, I think there's a lot of expectation that there was going to be some difficulty with confirmations for nominees like Gaetz. And so I think it's just a testament to the fact that there is ultimately this disconnect between what the MAGA mandate is and what who's actually elected into the Senate.
Rebeka, we should say, I want to make sure we mention these names out loud. And if you have anything to add, please do. I mean, Jonathan Swan, right, a while ago, New York Times, he said Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, Susan Collins of Maine, Mitch McConnell of Kentucky, and John Curtis of Utah were the people who were not going to support him, and that pretty much does it. So there's that. Real quick, for the future, are you hearing anything about who the AG nominee may be? Certainly, Ken Paxton, Attorney General of Texas, and Andrew Bailey, Attorney General of Missouri, are in the race. They were spoken about early on. Anyone else out there? And what are you hearing?
Those are honestly the two names that I've heard the most. And I think for good reason. I think it's because both of those potential candidates, although there have not been any formal announcements since Gaetz' withdrawal, I think because both of those candidates are very aligned with the MAGA mandate and with Trump's policies, I think that's why we see those names resurface a lot, especially now that Gaetz has stepped down from his bid for Attorney General. But I think that what differentiates him from Gaetz is maybe that those two candidates don't necessarily carry the same burdens that he does. There's a lot of drama surrounding Congressman Gaetz, or former Congressman Gaetz. There's a lot of controversy. There's a lot of scandal, for better or for worse. But those other two candidates don't necessarily carry the same baggage, let's just say, for in terms of Washington, D.C. They are more likely, I think, to get through the Senate because the Republicans that you mentioned who otherwise would not have approved Gaetz don't really have a good reason to vote against someone like Ken Paxton. And so I think that's probably a more realistic bid. We'll have to see how it actually unfolds. But I think that both of those candidates are probably going to be at the top of Trump's list.
Rebeka, it's certainly going to be interesting. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, guys.
Matthew, it's like Rebeka said, the biggest news of the day since Matt Gaetz was originally announced, right? Like Matt Gaetz, no matter what, right? Firebrand, he is going to be out there and a headline drawer for sure, either way.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. I mean, there's part of me that he's very good at playing the game. He's very smart about this stuff. And it is funny, like it did cross a lot of people's minds that maybe there was some maneuvering going on here and some 4D chess, as Rebeka said. But who knows? Look, the thing is, there's a point to be made about those four senators, right, and who they will and won't vote for. And I think the thing that I've thought from the beginning, whether it's 4D chess or not, is if you have Gaetz come out there who's such a firebrand, so controversial, and then all of a sudden you put someone like a Ken Paxton out there, and Ken Paxton, look, he's fought the establishment, the entire very powerful Texas establishment, going into the Bush family and everyone else. He's given everyone here the finger and won. So he does have enemies. He does have investigations against him, right? In Texas, it could be dragged out into the national spotlight. But it's way less sexy than the Gaetz stuff, right? So you can see now, all of a sudden, he looks like, oh, well, he's Attorney General of a big state. Okay. He's been in some political battles. We get him in. Or, same with Bailey. God knows what's out there about him. These people would all be attacked in the same way, right, or worse. I mean, we live in a Kavanaugh world, right, where God knows what they can pull out at you. But it does feel like this drew some of the energy, right? They all made a beeline in there to pounce on Gaetz, and now we'll see what happens.
Yeah, anywhere you go from here, it's all going to be a lot easier from this point forward.